Dopamine is often called the pleasure chemical. That's not exactly right. It's not about happiness, it's about pursuit, anticipation, the signal your brain sends when something seems worth doing. It doesn't reward you after you succeed. It drives you to act before you do. In the natural world, this worked well. It pushed humans to find food, shelter, safety, and mates. It rewarded survival. You saw fruit. Your brain sent dopamine. You moved. You reached. You tasted. And if the result was good, your brain remembered the path that got you there. But modern systems learned how to trigger this signal without any real effort. They studied the loop: stimulus, anticipation, reward. And then they rebuilt it to serve a new function: keep people engaged. The early internet was built for access. Later, it was redesigned for retention. Everything became a slot machine. Your feed updates. You don't know what's coming next. That's the point. Uncertainty produces more dopamine than certainty. You scroll again. Another post. You scroll again. Another clip. One might be boring. One might be shocking. One might feel like exactly what you wanted. But none of them are guaranteed, and that's what keeps you going. B.F. Skinner showed this in the 20th century. He placed pigeons in a box. If they pecked a lever, food appeared. But when the rewards came at random intervals, the pigeons pecked more, not less. The uncertainty made the action stronger. Social platforms took this and scaled it. Twitter, TikTok, YouTube, not just places to connect or share. They became machines optimized for intermittent feedback. You don't know which video will entertain you, which post will get likes, which story will get replies. So you keep returning. This isn't by accident. Companies hire behavioral scientists. They test notification timings. They test color contrast. They test the order of posts in your feed. They measure how long you pause before clicking. Then they rearrange everything to keep your eyes locked. There's a term: variable reward schedule. It means the rewards come at irregular times, but the action stays consistent. It's the foundation of all modern engagement platforms. And it works on everyone. Children, adults, developers, executives. It doesn't matter how smart you are, the loop still applies. Apps use this structure, but they hide it inside bright visuals. Stories disappear after 24 hours, feeds refresh endlessly. Videos autoplay. The interface looks simple, but it's shaped by thousands of data points. Eye tracking, scroll velocity, click-through rates. You're not exploring a feed, you're responding to a system that knows more about your behavior than you do. Think about infinite scroll. There's no end point. You can't finish it. It removes natural stopping points. Books end. Magazines have a last page, but feeds don't. They're designed to bypass satiety. That moment where you'd normally stop, because the next hit could be better. This isn't random, it's engineered. Engagement is profitable. Every second you spend on a platform generates ad impressions. Attention becomes currency, and your brain becomes the factory. Dopamine controls your attention. The platforms control your dopamine. The problem isn't the content, it's the structure. The reward system doesn't care what the reward is. It doesn't filter for value. It just responds to signals, novelty, surprise, stimulus, and that makes it easy to hijack. Experts on addiction explain that the brain doesn't distinguish between different kinds of rewards. Food, sex, drugs, likes, retweets, all processed through similar pathways. If it triggers anticipation, it triggers dopamine. If it creates a loop, it becomes reinforcement. Addictive behavior isn't just about excess, it's about learned repetition. You do something, it works, you repeat it. Over time, the action becomes automatic, even if it no longer gives you the same return. This is the same pattern seen in compulsive gambling. You pull the lever, sometimes you win, most times you don't. But the possibility of reward keeps you invested. Social media mirrors this. You post. Sometimes people react, sometimes they don't. But the moments of recognition train the behavior. You return for the chance, not the guarantee. And the more platforms track your behavior, the more personalized the rewards become. They don't just guess what you'll like, they test what you'll click, and they adjust in real time. This isn't surveillance in the traditional sense. It's behavioral prediction. Systems that collect data, map your patterns, and feed you back exactly what keeps you active. So now, dopamine isn't just part of biology. It's a tool for design. Notifications are timed, posts are filtered, responses are prioritized. The structure creates momentum. One tap becomes 5. One video becomes 20. One scroll becomes an hour. And each cycle rewires your brain. You expect more frequent rewards, more stimulation, less silence, less boredom, less space to reflect. Attention spans shrink, patience drops. Stillness feels uncomfortable. Because the loop never ends, it just resets. The question is no longer why these tools are addictive. It's how much of your day is spent inside that loop. And once you understand how it works, the next step is asking, who benefits? Because someone is collecting the data. Someone is measuring the return. Someone is profiting from the time you can't get back. The dopamine economy is not built on value. It's built on behavior. And the longer you stay inside, the more the system gains. Even if you lose focus, even if you lose time, dopamine drives the machine. But the machine was built to make sure you never stop chasing the next hit. In the late 1800s, Ivan Pavlov was studying digestion. He worked with dogs. He noticed something strange. The dogs began to salivate before food arrived, not during eating, not after, but the moment they heard the sound that always came before the food. He tested it. He rang a bell before giving food, repeated the pattern. Soon the bell alone caused salivation. The dogs had linked the sound to the reward, not because they understood anything, but because the timing taught them what to expect. This was classical conditioning. A neutral signal, like a bell, becomes associated with something meaningful like food. Over time, the signal itself creates a response. It was a basic idea, but it changed how scientists understood learning. It showed that behavior could be shaped through patterns, not with thought, just reaction. Later, B.F. Skinner expanded the idea. He used rats. He built boxes with levers. When the rat pressed the lever, food came out. That was operant conditioning. The animal's action caused the outcome. Not just passive association, but active behavior linked to reward. Skinner discovered that rewards didn't need to be regular. In fact, they worked better when they were random. If the rat didn't know when the food would come, it pressed more often. The uncertainty made the action stronger. This was called a variable ratio schedule. The same system used in slot machines. You pull the handle, sometimes you win, most times you don't. But every pull feels worth it, because the next one might pay out. Behaviorists saw this as a breakthrough. They could explain more than animal learning. They could predict human behavior, not through reason or logic, but through repetition, feedback, and reward schedules. Now, fast forward. The same basic model sits in your pocket. Your phone doesn't beep randomly. It signals something, a message, a like, a mention. And over time, that sound builds meaning. Like Pavlov's bell, it becomes a cue. Not for food, but for engagement. Apps use this to guide behavior. Open the app, see a message, feel rewarded. Scroll, find something interesting, feel engaged. Tap, get a reply, feel connected. It feels like freedom. But the system is built to shape actions without asking you directly. Push notifications are the most obvious tool. They break through silence. They deliver signals at just the right time. Not always immediately. Sometimes delayed, sometimes clustered. All to maximize the chance you'll respond. And the rewards don't stop at one level. There are multiple loops. You get a badge, you get a comment, you get a streak. One small response leads to the next. And like Skinner's box, the timing is critical. The more irregular the reward, the harder it is to stop. The system rewards persistence. What started in a lab with dogs and rats is now embedded in nearly every major platform. They don't need to force usage. They guide behavior, quietly, predictably. This isn't about content. It's about feedback design. A platform might show you a notification right after you post something. You return. You get a like. The cycle continues. Or maybe it delays the signal to keep you checking. The difference from Skinner's era is scale. He had a few pigeons, a few rats. Today, platforms run millions of behavioral tests daily. They adjust interfaces based on what keeps people clicking longer. There's no moral code in this system, only metrics. Time spent, click-through rate, session length. If a pattern works, it stays. If it doesn't, it's replaced. Even small tweaks matter. Color of buttons, position of icons, delay before autoplay, all optimized through experiments. all measured in real time. It's a shift in how influence works. In the past, control often came from rules, from laws, from punishments. But these systems use habits. They bypass force. They guide from the inside. You don't feel controlled, but your behavior is shaped. Foucault described this transformation decades ago. He said power was no longer just top-down. It was internalized. People monitored themselves. Systems made individuals conform by structuring incentives. That's exactly what's happening. You don't need to be told what to do. You learn it through the interface. If you pause while scrolling, the algorithm adjusts. If you skip, it records that too. Then it reshapes the feed. Over time, the feed begins to know you better than you know yourself. And this process isn't random. It's based on decades of psychology. What Pavlov discovered was the link between signals and actions. What Skinner found was that reward schedules made behavior stick. What today's platforms do is combine both, at scale, using machine learning, real-time data, and massive feedback loops. That's the evolution. From dogs to users, from bells to phones, from food to likes, from punishment to persuasion. The goal isn't to punish you into action. It's to train you into habits you don't notice. The more automatic, the better. Behavior becomes product, attention becomes inventory, and time becomes profit. It's not science fiction, it's daily life. The transition from behaviorism to design happened quietly, but it reshaped how choices are made. Not with laws, not with threats, but with systems that predict and adapt to you faster than you can think. The box has changed, but the lever's still there, and someone's still pressing it. Michel Foucault didn't study power the way most thinkers did. He didn't ask who had it. He asked how it worked, how it moved, how it changed form. For him, power wasn't just something held by governments or enforced by laws. It existed in routines, in rules, in systems that trained people to act without force. He started with history. He looked at madness, at punishment, at prisons. Not to understand criminals, but to see how authority changed behavior. He noticed something. Over time, society stopped using pain as the main way to control people. It started using structure, observation, records, labels. In the Middle Ages, punishment was public. Torture was a warning. But by the modern period, prisons replaced the scaffold. Silence replaced spectacle. Control became quieter, but deeper. Foucault said power no longer needed chains. It used norms. Not commands, but expectations. That's when he turned to a strange idea. A building called the Panopticon. It was first designed by Jeremy Bentham. A circular prison. In the center, a tower. From that tower, a guard could see every cell. But the prisoners couldn't see the guard. They never knew when they were being watched. Foucault saw this as a perfect model for modern control. The power wasn't in force. It was in the possibility of being observed. Because when people don't know if they're being seen, they act as if they always are. And if you believe you're being watched, you change what you do. You monitor yourself. You adjust your actions. Not because someone told you to, but because you've absorbed the gaze. Foucault called this internal discipline. It was a shift. Power no longer punished directly. It shaped minds. Think about a classroom. Students line up, raise their hands, follow the bell. There's no violence, just structure. But behavior is managed through repetition. Over time, rules become automatic. He said institutions do this all the time. Schools, hospitals, factories, prisons. They don't just guide actions, they define what counts as normal. Foucault didn't think freedom disappeared. He thought it was redefined. Power didn't always say no. Sometimes it said yes. It encouraged certain choices. It made some actions easy and others harder. This is where he broke from older views. People used to think power was repressive, that it simply stopped you from doing what you wanted. But Foucault said the most effective control didn't forbid, it produced, it trained, it gave shape to what people wanted. This is how desire could be guided, without punishment, without threats. Now think about today's systems. Your phone, your apps, your platforms. They don't block you. They give you options. But those options are filtered, curated, arranged in a way that nudges decisions. You feel free. But the path is already drawn. Foucault's insight wasn't about politics in the usual sense. It was about systems of knowledge, about how categories shape people, about how being labeled affects behavior. Normal, healthy, productive, dangerous. These aren't neutral terms. They carry weight, they guide treatment, they influence how people are seen, and how they see themselves. When someone is called a patient, they're not just a person anymore, they're a subject. When someone is called a criminal, the label sticks. The category follows them. It justifies surveillance. It organizes action. This is what Foucault meant by disciplinary power. It doesn't use force. It uses procedures. Surveillance isn't just cameras. It's also metrics, reports, rankings, tests, scores. All ways of tracking and comparing. And once you're compared, you adjust. You study harder. You work longer. You respond faster. Not because someone's yelling at you, but because you're being measured. This is the trap. Power doesn't just act from above. It flows through the systems you live in. It doesn't need to restrict you directly. It shapes what you think is worth doing. That's why Foucault said the panopticon wasn't just a prison, it was a model. A way to build institutions where control didn't feel like control. Where obedience didn't need commands. You watch yourself. You correct yourself. Because you've learned how to be seen. Now imagine that logic applied to every screen, every app, every algorithm. The panopticon becomes digital. You're being tracked, but you don't know when. You're being evaluated, but you never see the full criteria. Yet you still respond. You post, you check, you wait, you refresh. Each action builds a profile. That profile feeds into a system. That system learns what keeps you active. And the cycle continues. It's not that someone's punishing you. It's that you've absorbed the design. Foucault didn't offer a solution. He wasn't trying to fix the system. He wanted people to see it, to notice the mechanisms, to realize that what feels like freedom might be structure in disguise. Because once power becomes internal, it doesn't need to demand anything. It just needs to arrange the world in a certain way. And once that happens, you do the rest yourself. In Foucault's time, the structure was visible. Schools, prisons, hospitals, military. Places with walls, schedules, uniforms, orders. These were systems designed to shape behavior, not just punish. The idea was control through routine, through surveillance, through roles. You learned how to behave by being observed. You adapted through repetition. That was discipline. But something has changed. The walls are still there, but now they're digital. The schedule hasn't disappeared. It's been replaced by alerts. Instead of bells, we get buzzes. Instead of guards, we get metrics. Instead of rules, we get suggestions. The shift is not about restriction. It's about stimulation. Platforms don't use commands. They use cues, notifications, rewards, triggers. These systems don't force, they invite. And that invitation is constant, silent, but always waiting. The tools have changed, but the goal is the same: predict and guide behavior. Foucault showed how discipline worked through structure. The school taught obedience, the factory trained the body, the asylum classified the mind. But today's platforms skip the formality. They go straight for the circuit. They don't ask what you think. They ask what you'll click, what you'll scroll, what will keep you active. That's how dopamine enters the frame. Dopamine is not the feeling of pleasure. It's the driver of pursuit. The signal that tells the brain, this matters. This might lead somewhere. It's the spark before the reward. And modern systems are built to trigger it constantly. There are no schedules anymore, just endless access. No assigned tasks, just infinite options. No single authority, just algorithms adjusting in real time. Discipline told you when to act. Dopamine makes you want to. Apps are not structured around commands, they're built around loops. Cue, action, reward, repeat. Open the feed, scroll, see something new, get a reaction, then do it again. The loop doesn't stop, it just resets. This isn't by accident, it's design. Built on data, refined through testing. The platforms know what makes you stay, what patterns keep attention, what rhythms feel natural. You're not told what to do. You're guided through patterns. The old system required force. The new one just requires feedback, and that's the deeper shift, from external discipline to internal drive. Foucault said institutions taught people how to regulate themselves. What happens now is different. You don't just follow instructions, you chase reward, the system learns what you want, then gives you just enough to keep you going. And that's the trap. Because it doesn't feel like control, it feels like choice, like entertainment, like freedom. But every action feeds the loop, every tap, every like, every second watched. That's a signal. That's feedback into a larger engine, one that refines content, that sharpens delivery, that shapes desire. This is the new structure. You're not locked in a room. You're tethered by impulse. You're not ordered. You're nudged. You're not forced to obey. You're trained to return. Discipline created order through repetition. Dopamine creates attachment through variability, and what makes it stronger is uncertainty. Variable rewards are more effective than fixed ones. If you know what's coming, you lose interest. But if it's unpredictable, you stay longer. That's why the feed never ends. That's why the notification doesn't tell you exactly what it is. That's why you check without thinking. The mechanism is invisible, but the behavior is precise. Foucault's point wasn't that people are weak. It was that systems evolve, power adjusts. What worked before becomes outdated. And when the tools change, so do the methods. Today, the system doesn't need to enforce. It just needs to stimulate. And once you're stimulated, the pattern continues. You engage, you repeat. You don't notice the structure, because it looks like entertainment. The chain isn't physical, it's behavioral, and you pull it yourself. That's what Foucault meant when he said modern systems train people to desire their own limitations. You end up wanting what keeps you in place, not because you're told to, but because the system has linked desire to repetition. It's not a cage, it's a loop, and the longer it runs, the harder it is to leave. Not because someone blocks the exit, but because the loop doesn't give you a reason to stop. There was a series of experiments in the 1960s. Psychologists placed dogs in a box with 2 compartments. In one version, they couldn't escape a mild shock, no matter what they did. After repeated trials, they stopped trying. Even when the door was later opened and escape was possible, the dogs didn't move. They stayed, because they'd learned it didn't matter what they did. Action no longer changed the outcome. That condition became known as learned helplessness. Now think about modern systems. You wake up to pings, banners, badges. You check emails, then messages, then updates, new posts, breaking news, trending clips. The stream keeps coming. Information doesn't pause. It floods. There's no clear start or end. The volume is constant. The cycle doesn't reset. There's no finish line. And the platforms know this. They're built for it. They thrive on it. So you scroll, then scroll again. Not because it's meaningful, but because that's what's there. Over time, it becomes harder to tell what's worth your time, what's urgent, what's noise, and what's control. You switch between apps. From one feed to the next, you respond, you refresh, you reply, you react, and still, you fall behind. There's always more to check, more to catch up on, more to respond to. But the outcome doesn't change, the work doesn't finish, the stream doesn't end. The same feeling the dogs had in those experiments, that nothing you do affects the system, becomes the default. You stop trying to change the structure, you start adjusting to it. The platforms don't punish you, they engage you, but in doing so, they wear you down. Notifications are constant, but rarely urgent. Recommendations feel tailored, but are shaped by patterns you didn't choose. Options appear endless, but lead in circles. The brain adapts. It conserves effort. It accepts the system. It stops questioning the setup and just participates. That's learned helplessness in the digital world. The trap isn't pain, it's overload. Too many options, too many signals, no clear feedback, no end goal. So you default to habit. You tap what's familiar. You return without thinking. You respond without context. It's not laziness, it's learned behavior. The platforms create the illusion of control. You feel like you're choosing, but what you see is filtered, prioritized, ordered. The system narrows the field, then makes you believe you picked it. And once that pattern becomes normal, you stop noticing the loop. The same way those dogs didn't try to escape, users stop looking for alternatives. They accept the design as natural, as neutral, but it isn't neutral, it's engineered. The architecture encourages constant checking, but gives little back. The feedback is shallow, the reward is temporary. The loop runs long enough to create dependency, but not satisfaction. Eventually, passivity becomes default. The response is automatic. You're not navigating, you're reacting. Not because you're incapable, but because the system teaches you that resistance doesn't change the outcome. You don't quit the app, you scroll slower, you don't turn off notifications, you ignore them until the next one. You don't clear the feed, you let it fill up again. This isn't just habit, it's design. And over time, you internalize that design. You stop fighting the current. You move with it. The platform doesn't need to force your hand. It just needs you to stay inside the system. Learned helplessness isn't about giving up. It's about adjusting to a world where trying harder makes no difference, where choice feels free, but the path is already set. And once that feeling becomes routine, submission follows. Not the kind enforced by rules, but the kind maintained by repetition, by overstimulation, by mental fatigue. You're not told to obey. You just stop resisting. And when that happens, the system doesn't need to do anything else. Addiction doesn't stop at behavior. It moves deeper. It starts with repetition. But with enough exposure, it becomes something more permanent. Not just what you do, but who you think you are. When algorithms track everything, what you click, how long you watch, who you follow, they build a version of you. Not the full picture, just a pattern. A reflection made from numbers, preferences, timing, speed, pauses, what you avoid, what you return to. That version becomes the model. The algorithm doesn't know your goals. It doesn't care about your past. It just looks at data. What you consume becomes who you appear to be. And then, it feeds you more of the same. Watch one type of content long enough, and your feed adjusts. Click something unusual, and the system tracks the shift. It doesn't ask why you looked. It assumes you want more, so it sends it again, then again, until it becomes normal. Over time, this repetition builds a loop, not just in what you see, but how you respond. You start expecting the same topics, the same tone, the same format. Anything different feels off, and that's the shift. The dopamine loop isn't just a cycle of input and reward, it's a filter. It teaches your brain what to notice, what to crave, what to repeat. The more you engage with a certain style, the more your identity starts to lean in that direction. Not consciously, just gradually, the feedback shapes your preferences. It narrows your focus, it reduces your range. The algorithm builds a profile. That profile gets sharper every day, and eventually you begin aligning with it, because it feels efficient, because it feels accurate, because the system rewards consistency. But that consistency isn't identity, it's response. The feedback loop rewards what fits the mold and punishes what doesn't. Try something different. The clicks slow down, the reach drops, the interaction fades, so you return to what works. You repeat the actions that keep the loop alive, and slowly the loop becomes the blueprint. This is the algorithmic self. A version of you trained by metrics, built by habit, shaped by platforms. It's not built from reflection, it's built from reaction. You don't explore ideas, you reinforce patterns, you don't test assumptions, you scroll through confirmation. This isn't just passive engagement, it's identity formation. Repetition becomes personality, the feed becomes self-description. But it's narrow, and it's reactive. It doesn't allow room for contradiction, or growth, or doubt. It just optimizes what's already there, or what the system thinks is already there. And that's the problem. Because identity needs flexibility. It needs space to shift, to question, to stretch beyond habit. But the loop doesn't offer that. It rewards quick attention, it filters out depth, it accelerates sameness. The dopamine hits don't just keep you locked in. They mold your preferences. They decide what feels right, what feels natural, what feels like you. But that you is shaped by input, not intention. Addiction stops being a separate issue. It becomes integrated. It starts as a pattern. It ends as self-perception. You scroll not just out of habit, but because it feels familiar. You engage because that's what you're used to. You build your sense of self around the content you see most. And that cycle feeds itself. The longer it runs, the more solid it feels. Even if it's narrow. Even if it's incomplete. Even if it's based on repetition, not choice. The algorithm doesn't care who you become. It only cares what you'll click next, but the mind adjusts to that input. It forms around it. And that's how addiction stops being about behavior and starts shaping identity. When you sign up for a new app, You scroll to the bottom of a long list of terms. You're asked to accept. There's no real negotiation, no detailed breakdown. Just a quick tap, and you're in. The fine print disappears. Your consent is given. But do you actually understand what you agreed to? What part of your behavior is being tracked? What parts of your preferences are being sold? You consent, but it's not a real choice. You don't understand the full scope of what's being asked. You're told it's a free exchange, but in reality, it's a manufactured need. The app doesn't just offer services. It creates dependencies. It designs systems that keep you engaged. This isn't about choice. It's about control. The illusion of freedom masks a reality of influence. The apps give you access, but what you get in return is your time, your attention, your data. You consent to that exchange, but it's a transaction stacked in their favor. And once you're in, the system works to keep you hooked, all while convincing you that you're making your own decisions. Your brain is not built to handle this constant flow. Thousands of years of evolution designed your mind to focus on immediate needs, like food, shelter, and safety. Yet now you're living in an environment that floods your senses with constant updates, alerts, and notifications. This isn't natural. Dopamine, the chemical that encourages action and reward, was designed to encourage you to pursue survival-related tasks. It's a tool to help you learn and grow. But now, dopamine is being hijacked. Every notification, every like, every message taps into that same system. It doesn't matter if the content is important. It doesn't matter if the reward is real or not. What matters is the cycle it creates. Every time you check your phone, your brain expects a little burst of dopamine, a hit of reward. Over time, you become conditioned to crave that burst. The more you check, the more you need. The app doesn't have to force you to engage. It just gives you small rewards that make you want to come back again and again. This creates a mismatch. Your brain is stuck trying to keep up with an environment it wasn't built for. It wasn't designed to constantly react to new stimuli. But now, that's what happens. You're pulled in. Not because you're making free decisions, but because your brain is wired to respond to the next hit. And here's the problem. It doesn't stop. The apps are designed to keep you coming back. Not to make you better or smarter or even happier, but to keep you plugged in. You become a participant in a system that thrives on your attention. It's not chains that bind you. It's likes, notifications, and the need for validation. These are the new control systems. They keep you chasing, keep you coming back for more, always searching for the next small fix of dopamine. This is the new slavery. You don't see the chains, you don't feel the bars, but you're controlled all the same. It's not physical, it's mental. Your time, your focus, your energy, it all belongs to the platforms. And while you may think you're in control, in reality, the system has become a silent, invisible force shaping your behavior. And this is where Foucault's insight becomes clear. Power doesn't always come from direct control. Sometimes, the most effective form of power is when you no longer need to be told what to do. When you do it yourself, without realizing it. When the rules of the system become the framework of your life. The illusion of consent is powerful. It tricks you into thinking you're making choices, when in reality, the choices are designed for you. Your clicks, your preferences, your attention. They're all being steered in ways that benefit someone else. And yet, you don't feel forced. You don't feel controlled. But that's the trick. Control doesn't always come from force. Sometimes, it comes from designing a system where you do all the work yourself. You police yourself. You check your phone. You refresh your feed. You engage. You feel in charge. But you're not. The system is. This is Foucault's point. The power that shapes your behavior doesn't have to be overt. It can be subtle. It can be hidden. It doesn't need to trap you physically. It can trap your mind. This is the power that the digital world exerts over you. It doesn't force you to act. It doesn't push you. It just designs a system where your actions, your attention, your choices all align with its goals. And you don't even realize you're playing the game. This isn't a conspiracy. It's simply the result of a system that's designed to maximize engagement. And it doesn't care about you. It only cares about what you'll do next. So, when you think you're freely browsing, you're not. When you think you're choosing what to look at, you're not. When you think you're in control of your attention, you're not. The system has already shaped your preferences, your desires, and your behavior. And it's done it without you even noticing. This is the illusion of consent. It's the illusion that you're free, when in reality, you're being constantly guided by a system that knows you better than you know yourself. In the end, it's not about chains, it's about attention. And the true power is in how you spend it. The first step in escaping this system is to understand that you're trapped. You're not free when every decision is guided by algorithms. When every choice is nudged in a certain direction, you're not making your own decisions. So the first step is simple: awareness. The moment you see the system for what it is, you gain power over it. Knowledge gives you the ability to make conscious decisions, to choose when and how to engage. Without this awareness, the system controls you without your consent. But once you realize how it works, you have the ability to push back. Understanding the trap is the first line of defense. Once you're aware, you can start to take back control. And that control begins with how you handle dopamine. The very chemical that the system uses to keep you hooked can also be your tool to break free. This is where practical steps come in. Dopamine fasting is a strategy. It's about intentionally stepping away from the constant flow of stimulation. It's about giving your brain a break from the constant hits that keep you craving more. When you stop feeding the loop, you start to regain control. The more you abstain from these instant rewards, the more you can train your brain to crave deeper, more meaningful tasks. Another important practice is monotasking. In a world built on constant distractions, focusing on one task at a time feels almost revolutionary. The world tells you to multitask, to spread your attention thin across many things. But this just keeps you trapped in that endless feedback loop. By focusing on a single task, you can slow the rush of dopamine and build more meaningful engagement with what you're doing. Curating your inputs is just as crucial. You can't control the world's noise, but you can control what you let in. Choose what you consume wisely. Feed your mind with quality content, not mindless scrolling. This takes effort, but it's the only way to fight the system on its own terms. You start to shape your environment rather than letting it shape you. Setting up phone detox zones is another useful tactic. Certain areas of your life should be free from constant interruptions. Your bedroom, your dining table, your workspace. These should be places where you reclaim focus and quiet. These zones act as a mental reset, helping you break away from the constant pull of digital notifications. And then, there's the importance of boredom. It sounds strange, but boredom is crucial for creativity and real growth. The constant stimulation from your devices keeps you from sitting with your thoughts. Reintroducing boredom into your life allows your brain to wander, to reflect, and to engage with ideas outside the digital realm. This is when true creativity begins to surface. But none of these steps will work unless you replace empty stimulation with something more meaningful. The constant need for instant gratification can only be fought by engaging in deeper, more fulfilling activities. This means putting effort into things that take time, creating, learning, connecting with others. Viktor Frankl, the philosopher who survived the Holocaust, understood this better than anyone. He argued that meaning is what gives life value. In a world that thrives on distractions, it's easy to lose sight of that. But by focusing on meaning over stimulation, you can begin to find purpose beyond the quick hits of dopamine. Frankl's ideas align with Foucault's in an important way. Foucault showed that freedom is often an illusion created by systems of control. But both philosophers agree on one point. True freedom comes from creating meaning in your life, from choosing your path, and from recognizing that power exists. But it's how you use it that matters. Foucault suggested that the most effective form of control is when people believe they are free. But the real liberation comes from seeing through that illusion and creating a life of purpose. To reclaim your freedom, you need to stop accepting the system's definition of what's important. The apps, the notifications, the constant distractions, these are the tools of control. But once you understand them, you can turn them into your own tools. You have the power to create your own environment. You have the power to decide what your attention will go toward. The real rebellion is in choosing your own stimulus, designing an environment that supports the life you want to live, not the life the system is pushing you toward. This is what true freedom looks like. It's not just walking away from distractions, it's designing a world that reflects your values, your goals, your deeper desires. It's in making decisions with purpose and intention, not being pulled along by the invisible forces of technology. So, reclaim your time, reclaim your mind, and most importantly, reclaim your freedom. Because in a world built to distract and control, the real revolution is about how you choose to live your life. To break free from the dopamine trap, it starts with awareness. By recognizing how the system influences you, you take the first step toward reclaiming control. Implementing practical strategies like dopamine fasting, monotasking, and curating your environment will help you regain focus and restore meaning to your life. It's about choosing depth over distraction, purpose over instant gratification. Now, the real challenge begins. The world won't change overnight, and neither will your habits. But if you start today with one small change, you'll begin to escape the endless cycle. Don't wait for permission or hope for an easy solution. The power is in your hands. If you're ready to make a change, start by identifying one area of your life where you can regain control. Whether it's reducing your screen time, curating your digital inputs, or setting up phone-free zones, take that first step now. The path to freedom is not a one-time event, but a series of conscious choices. You have the power to design your life, and that's where true freedom begins. If this video has opened your eyes to how much control the digital world has over you, now is the time to act. Take back your power. Start by making one change today. Whether it's turning off notifications, setting a screen time limit, or dedicating time to something meaningful. Don't let the system dictate your life. Subscribe, share this video, and join the conversation. Let's build a movement of awareness and intentional living. The first step to freedom starts now. Take it. Thank you for watching till the end. This means you're serious in reclaiming your life. For more of this type of content, do well to like, share the video, and subscribe to the channel for more educational content. Thank you.